Most people don't know what becoming means. They don't remember who they are before life layered itself on top of everything, on top of them. So let me tell you, Root, Realign, and Rise, the podcast. What do these three words really mean? Root means coming back to ourselves. Root is the homecoming, the grounding, the quiet recognition that I'm still here. Even when everything else feels lost, Root is where you stop pretending, where we stop performing, we stop running. Root is the return to our truth. And Realign? Realign is choosing what still matters. It's where honesty happens. It's the place where we ask, what is mine to carry? And what has drained me? What have I outgrown? What has God been trying to shift in these years for ourselves? Realign is where life begins to match identity, not the other way around. And Rise. Rise means moving before we feel ready. Rise is not triumph. Rise is movement, showing up imperfectly, leading with presence instead of performance, taking one step from the part of us that is still alive. Rise is where healing becomes purpose. Hey friends, I'm really glad that you're here. Before I start the podcast, I wanted to do it in a way that made sense, with the truth, with a little bit of my truth, and not just the polished version or the speaker bio, not with titles or even achievements. I wanted to start with me, the woman that God had rebuilt from the inside out, the woman behind the Root, Realign, and Rise podcast, the woman who had to lose almost everything that she thought that she was, and before she could become who she always thought she was meant to be. So pull up a chair. This is where the journey begins, before the collapse, before my illness, before I'd even touched my body. I was a woman living at full speed. I was running multiple businesses, one that grew into 34 states, actually. I was recognized, myself and my partners in this business, for our best in service, our best in business, our top sales, and our top leadership. We were featured, we were awarded, we were applauded. I built an event brand too. I had an event planning company. It focused on the creativity, the expansion, the thriving. I also had competed on a global stage at that point with over 30,000 women. And somehow, against every odd, I made it to the final round. I finished fourth, and from the outside, it looked everything like momentum. My life looked like success, and it looked like strength and confidence, presence, influence. But inside, I was cracking. My marriage was straining under the business and the pressures of it. Trust felt really fragile to me with just about everyone. Everything was about performance for me at that time. Control had become my protection because somewhere deep down, I didn't trust that anyone could hold what I was holding. I ignored all of my traumas from childhood even. I let people use my voice while I stayed small. I stayed safe. I was carrying burdens that were mine because it felt safer to carry them than to face them. Strength wasn't just what I showed. It became who I believed that I had to be, to perform, to produce, and to please others. And then one day, it felt like one day, but it was a buildup. My body had broke. It really didn't start very gently. It started violently. I began vomiting every day, all day. My weight had dropped to 90 pounds. I went from running 9 miles every day to barely being able to walk to my front door. My muscles had dissolved and my energy had disappeared, and it had depleted everything out of me. My body felt like I would say, a dimming light. My nervous system was malfunctioning, and I was swinging back and forth like a pendulum between tachycardia and bradycardia, sometimes within minutes, and sometimes it would make me pass out. I couldn't eat. I feared food, but I respected it because I knew it was the one thing that was going to keep me alive. And when nothing else was, there were hospitalizations and contradicting diagnoses, and I had a mini stroke. There were blockages. I had warnings of feeding tubes and warnings of heart attacks and warnings that if I did any small move, I would stroke. My digestion had nearly stopped. My organs were whispering the truth before any doctor could say it aloud. And when the doctors did speak, they said the one sentence that changed a person pretty much forever. there is no cure, and that's what is a chronic illness. We searched everywhere for answers, functional medicine and protocols, even to the point of traveling internationally to find stem cell clinics that I could somehow try to afford. And it was anything that I could hold on to for a sliver of hope and possibility. Stem cell therapy gave me windows of time for healing and a little bit of an opening of being able to maneuver and work and learn with my body. And I would have brief moments of life returning. I would get a little bit of clarity and a little bit of appetite and hope, but then it would fade again back into this darkness. And there were nights that I didn't know if I was going to wake up. I didn't know if I wanted to at times. And mornings when I wasn't sure that I wanted to get out of bed. And if I did, it was just to crawl back to the toilet and be sick again. My life was breaking on just about every front. And as my body was collapsing, my business was collapsing too. We had a hostile takeover in that time. There was this psychological pressure and brainwashing and manipulation and middle of the night calls and fear tactics and frozen accounts and lawyers and an office full of sickness because it was during that time of COVID. And I didn't have the immune system to fight. I had 3 weeks of halted revenue, and it literally shut everything down when you've already put everything out there. On Christmas that year, there were legal threats and a realization that we were being removed from every little bit of company that we had built and thought that we knew for 20 years. We had to lay off people that we loved, and Christmas time is not a fun time to do that in. It broke my heart as I had to try and remain stoic and try and find peace for them and places that they could call home at their new work because I cared and because I didn't want to leave them on the street, but I had no other options. I was willing to take the blame and the fault and learning and growth in it myself as a leader, and yet I could barely lead myself. We had to close temporarily as we watched our life's work break apart in our hands. We tried again and again, and we rebuilt and we partnered, and we finally started to really believe again that there was hope. And then just about 2 years after that, right when we thought we recovered, the label Home Depot was secured as being able to be the authorized agent in our industry to sell in their stores through our bank that we would sell the contracts to. And if you look up this history of it now, most banks would know the story of it. We were part of the story of the Sonova collapse and bankruptcy, and we were one of their demises. We had millions that we had put in hopes that their name, their label, their brand, their corporations, and all of what they could bring would bring more stability to us, thinking it was the safest approach to our business. Instead, millions that we had invested in deals that were already being installed to consumers, frozen, months of work unpaid, the fragile hope of rebuilding that was shattered again. It was loss after loss on top of all of the other losses, and loss of identity, loss of my health, watching the loss of my business. Any bit of trust was lost, any bit of security, and the thought of what my purpose was then. Everything had fallen apart. I watched those I love have to fall with it, those that I cared for. I watched them lose trust in me as a leader, and I fell right along with it. There were dark nights, and I remember one night, a night after my stem cell treatments. I was highly medicated. I was exhausted. I was overrun with the fear, and your stem cells deplete everything out of you, and so everything felt much bigger that night. But I felt every bit of the dissolve that was happening. But in that moment, something inside of me had broken, and I had a whisper, a little bit of clarity, I think I call it now, that I didn't expect. This whisper was telling me that, Mairin, this isn't about just you. This is generational purpose. You're preserving something for yourself, but more for your family. You're building something so that Jason, my husband, he can build your children when you leave. Something that they can stand on. And while I didn't know when I was leaving, I felt that it was soon because everything was collapsing. But I wanted to leave them something that they could stand on. And it didn't take away my pain, but it anchored me in meaning. So I started to write. I needed to understand it. At first, it wasn't beautiful writing, and it certainly wasn't intentional. It was more of a brain dump of all of the thoughts and emotions and just frustration and imposter syndrome, maybe a little bit of anger. I didn't write beautifully, and I certainly wasn't writing intentionally. I wasn't writing as an author then. I was writing as a woman who was trying to survive. Journaling had become the lifeline, though. My words, they became my oxygen. And those pages became the journal, and the journal slowly became the book. And my book, Rooted Not Rush, became the first flicker of purpose that I had felt in years. I didn't write it to inspire anyone, and I wrote it in case I didn't survive. So my children, they would have a blueprint to stay alive themselves when life breaks them open. Because let's be real, life isn't gentle at times, but it has a way of cracking us open, and it teaches us what resilience and strength we have. And while I love them so much, I love them more than my own survival. And that love kept me there. It became the moment that I rose in. My mentor, Amberly Lago, I happened on her Instagram. I was pretty numb at that point, and I was searching for a reason to just keep trying. I was giving up hope. It had been about 4 years in this process of time since I had really gotten chronically ill and had been bedridden for the last, I think, 3 years at that point. And for the first time in a long time, I was watching a woman inspire me, and hope had sparked in me because she was sharing her own resilience and story of survival. I don't even know why or how that day. In fact, it's funny. It feels like a blur. Something made me reach out. I wasn't even quite sure why at that point. And I asked her to help me write my book. Jason, my husband, I don't think he even understood. But at that point, I think he was just trying to look for anything to give me some spark and some hope. And so he supported me. And even though he was scared too. And man, that man was so stoic. He always cared for me then. He still does to this day, don't get me wrong. It's when I learned a lot about our relationship and how much I love him, and I learned how to trust him during that time. Promised myself I wouldn't cry in this. He taught me how to love and to be loved really at that point. But I could see he was scared, and slowly, between him and between Amberly, I could feel the ground under me again. She had asked me to come to her event called the Unstoppable event in Dallas, Texas, after I had met her, and while we didn't have a lot of money, she said, just get in the room. And I got in the room, and at first I was overwhelmed, and I had yet at that point to be away from Jason for 5 years. I was scared to leave, scared to move my house. And he pretty much carried me through the airport there to get there. But I had enough courage and I had had enough strength to get in the room. And somehow someone had handed me a microphone. And I just felt this massive urge of calling. And without planning it, without intending it, I said to the microphone, to this room of people I didn't know who were inspiring me just to be there, I think I'm supposed to start a podcast. Not because I felt ready or because I felt whole at the time. In fact, I wasn't anywhere close. It was probably the healthiest I had felt in years because I had left the room and I had left my house and I had had some sort of hope that was stirring and growing in me. But I was still sick. In fact, I was still sick in the bathroom of the hotel those days that I was there. But because something inside me was rising, there was truth that I couldn't ignore anymore. And so that's why this podcast has started to exist. I'm not here because I'm whole. I'm here because I learned how to rise while being unwhole. Because I survived when I should have given up. It should have ended me. And now it's actually helping me build life a little bit differently. Not in confidence, not in control, but rather with purpose. A little bit more slowness, not with pressure. I had given all of that up to God years ago, and I had said that I needed Him to take control. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to survive and sit here today. I learned at that time that leadership is not about perfection. It's not about holding everything together. It's about staying strong through the storms. That's where leadership begins, when you choose to move from the part of you that is still alive. Because women everywhere are collapsing for all many reasons, under our own unseen heavy loads. And while they all look different, we're losing ourselves inside the busyness, the chaos, the obligations, the stresses, the illnesses. We're forgetting who we are. We're forgetting who we're meant to be. So this podcast is for those women and those men too. There will be men on this podcast, but my work is with women. I honor that because I understand that. And whole, this podcast is for you. Most people don't know what becoming means. They don't remember who they are before life layered itself on top of everything, on top of them. So let me tell you, Root, Realign, and Rise, the podcast. What do these 3 words really mean? Root means coming back to ourselves. Root is the homecoming, the grounding, the quiet recognition that I'm still here. Even when everything else feels lost, root is where you stop pretending, where we stop performing, we stop running. Root is the return to our truth. And realign? Realign is choosing what still matters. It's where honesty happens. It's the place where we ask, what is mine to carry? And what has drained me? What have I outgrown? What has God been trying to shift in these years for ourselves? Realign is where life begins to match identity, not the other way around. And rise. Rise means moving before we feel ready. Rise is not triumph. Rise is movement, showing up imperfectly, leading with presence instead of performance, taking one step from the part of us that is still alive. Rise is where healing becomes purpose. So before we close today, let me tell you something that's personal. This podcast began for me in December. I'm recording this now in December, not because I launched it just now, but because it's when I stopped waiting to be perfect. I spent a year from the time almost that I was in that room with that microphone in front of my face saying that I think I should start this. For almost a year, I said I wasn't ready. I needed more healing. I needed more time. But December, today, it reminds me that nothing about this message is meant to wait. So even though you're hearing this in January, which is when I'm planning to launch this is where the podcast truly begins. With that obedience, that honesty, with that part of me that's finally saying yes to what God was asking me to do, and that purpose that I really believe is what stems from my pain. So until episode 2 drops, I want to leave you with a simple practice: to root, to realign, and to rise. Root. I want you to take one deep breath each day. And I want to remind yourself, tell yourself, you're still here. You've made it this far, and you'll make it. But just focus right now, right here. And I want you to notice where your energy is going, the realignment. I want you to ask, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? And rise. One small action, just one, that honors the part of you that is still alive. Small is holy, but small counts. Small is how we rise. Baby steps, one fragile inch at a time. And regarding the legacy that I want to leave, before I go, this one's for my children. I fought every day for you, every hour, through the sickness, through the fear, through the loss, through the pain. I chose purpose, even when I was in that pain, because I love you. I love you so much more than my own survival. And when life breaks you open one day, as it does to all of us at some point, I want you to hear my voice and know you come from a woman who would not and did not quit. You come from resilience, and you can rise. You can rise too. This podcast is part of that blueprint. It's how it belongs to every one of us listening. In close, friend, I need you to know you're not alone. You're not unseen, and you're not behind. You're just becoming. And this is the beginning of that. There will be more episodes to come where we'll share those stories of people's resilience and tools and how they got through to inspire and help you through. So welcome to the Root, Realign, and Rise podcast. Let's rise together. See you on the next episode.